guarantees. We've had a great conversation today on the C Spire text line. Let's keep it going. If you want to be a part of it, you can text us at the C Spire text line 601-879-4395. We are joined now by Malcom Reed. How to barbecue right. This is something we've been teasing all morning. We've been getting great text comments all morning from people who are getting hungry thinking about it. Malcom, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic, Russ. How's it going?
It is going great. Did you have a good Christmas?
We did, man. It was good and cold up here in North Mississippi. You know, we went through some snow and froze up a little bit, but now it's back to 60 degrees. So you never know.
What were you smoking outside in the snow, Malcom? And did you have flip-flops on, or did you put real shoes on?
I had to put the real shoes on for this one. I couldn't wear the flip-flops, but for Christmas, it's all about those prime ribs and beef tenderloins. That's usually what my family requests, so that's what I did. And we get ready for support for the New Year's to get that luck coming in for 23.
There you go. Well, talk to me a little bit about that, because I think people would be interested in what you cook and how you cook it on both the tenderloin and the prime rib. I'm guessing that's a little bit of a different method that you're using.
Yeah, being the barbecue guy, I've got to put it on the smoker. So I like to do a good herb crust on the outside of it. I get away from the traditional barbecue flavors when I'm cooking for the holiday roast. So, I'll start with a good dose of salt, pepper, and garlic. That's whatever, that's a good foundation. And then usually I add some fresh herbs and garlic and, things like that, a little rosemary, and make a nice little herb crust on the outside. And then I like cooking everything just kind of low and slow. I usually run my pits about 250 to get some good smoke flavor and to get a bark going on the outside so that crust sets. I don't cook anything past medium rare when I'm cooking for the holidays. I think you ruin a prime rib or you ruin a beef tenderloin if you cook it much past 125 internal. So that's the whole key to it. Invest in a good meat thermometer and just, take your time with it.
Yeah, no, what kind of wood are you using to do a prime rib or a tenderloin?
Well, I stay away from the hard woods. I like using something like a little cherry or a little apple, something like that, maybe some maple, something that's going to give it a mild smoke flavor because, it's not like we're cooking a whole shoulder or a whole hog. We want to stay away from the hardwoods.
So I'm curious. You mentioned that you're doing even the beef tenderloin low and slow. I've always been worried when I'm doing a tenderloin that because there's not a lot of fat content that it's going to dry out on me, or that I'm going to end up too cooked on the inside and not have a crust on the outside. Doing it low and slow. Do you do any kind of sear on that tenderloin before you put it on or after you put it on?
Oh, usually I don't on the pit. I'm running at 250, so it's not like really, really cold smoking. It's a good medium heat at 250. And if you want a little bit firmer crust, you can cook it up around 300. But that 250 to 300 range is ideal for it. And it takes about, for a decent size, 5 to 7 pound beef tenderloin, it takes about 2.5 hours. So you're going to develop a nice little crust on the outside. But it keeps that temperature even all the way across. You don't get the outside overcooked. Like if you seared it, you're going to get that gray, and then it's going to turn to your medium rare, and it's going to be gray again on the bottom. Well, I like it to be really even across from tip to top, and cooking at those temps helps with that.
Well, that's awesome, man. One of the things that I have figured out is that oftentimes you can get really good deals on beef tenderloins after Christmas. That stores that stock up and they got leftover supply they want to get rid of. There's some good deals to be had out there on meat. You ever notice that?
Absolutely. I found a lot of them this week right after Christmas. A lot of them, they've had that big rush. They know it's going to be packed in the stores that week leading up to Christmas, but right after, it's a great time to catch a deal. And what you can do oftentimes. They're in cryovac packaging, so if you got a deep freeze, man, you can find one on a deal, stick it in there, and it'll be good for several months in the freezer.
Well, I've got an 18-pound Packer brisket sitting in my refrigerator right now that we were going to have for Christmas with family, but they didn't come up because of the weather. So I'm planning on sticking on the smoker today or tomorrow when we're done. So maybe get some tips from you in a bit on that. one of the texters that texted in said he got some Japanese A5 Wagyu ribeyes for Christmas, which is a nice gift, and wanted to know whether or not you'd cook those indirectly on a Weber kettle, or if you think that's a good idea.
That's a fantastic gift. And, with the A5 stuff, it has so much fat content in it that it doesn't do really well indirect. You really need to get a good sear on it because you want to heat it up enough to where that fat's going to melt, but you don't want to dry it out either. So I found with cooking those, they do better hot and fast because you want to keep them in that medium rare range the same way, but you want to get it done fairly quick so you don't want to overcook it. That's the main thing.
Well, talk to me a little bit about, we're obviously entering into the new year. What do you have on tap or on the grill heading into 2023?
So, with us, of course, we've got to do our greens and peas for luck, but then we've got to have some pork too. So I have a ham that I saved the bones from back in Thanksgiving that I've had in the freezer. So I've got it thawing out so I can use that ham bone and the shank and all that to flavor my vegetables. But for the roast, I'm going to cook a big pork loin. I've got a bone-in pork loin that I'm going to put on the smoker, season it up. I'm going to do the herb crust on it, something different, to kind of give it almost like I would season a prime rib. You kind of stick with those same flavors, but it goes excellent with those New Year's vegetables. And then I've got some hog gel too that we're going to cook up. So you got to have all that to get your health, luck, and wealth for the new year.
There you go. And on that pork loin, I think a lot of people came up the way I came up with moms and grandmas that said you're going to get worms and botulism and everything else under the sun if you do anything less than cook that pork loin to shoe leather. That's really not true, is it?
No. The USDA backed off of that, and I guess it was back in the day, before we had a lot of commercial pork and you could just go to the grocery store and get it. But they've backed off on those internal temperatures. Now, I'm not cooking it to where it's just pink all the way through, but if I see a little bit of pink, it's okay. The trick that I found to turn out the best pork loin is to cook it to where it's between 135 and 140. Get it off the pit, right. If you can get it off before it hits 140, you're great, but let it rest. And you want to cover it loosely with foil and just kind of let it hang out on the counter for about 20, 30 minutes. And if you're going to be serving it a little later than that, you can stick it down in a dry cooler and it'll hold heat in that dry cooler. But you let it carry over, and it's going to finish out about 145, 150, which is about the medium range. And it'll be juicy. It may have a slight pink around the edge a little bit, but it's perfectly done. It's been in that safe zone to kill anything in it for plenty of time, and you don't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't like the idea of pork loin in part because they're used to having it overcooked. People love pulled pork because there's such fat content in that you can overcook the heck out of that bad boy, and obviously overcooking it's what you want to do, low and slow, right? But with a pork loin, if you're cooking it to 165 degrees or 160 degrees, you're going to eat something that probably is not that much fun to eat.
That's right. And, it's really a great value to cook those pork loins as long as you take the time and learn how to cook them right. It's fantastic, and you can feed a lot of people off of them. Just cook them till they're about medium, and they'll still be juicy. They'll still be tender. You can brine it if you want to add some extra moisture, extra flavor to it. It's really not a hard piece of meat to learn to cook.
Well, tell me if this is sacrilege, because I would have answered the question to the gentleman who asked about the A5 Wagyu in a way that probably wouldn't have involved a grill. It probably would have involved a very hot cast iron skillet for a couple minute sear to get that fat melted, but not to do much else. Do you ever cook a steak inside, or are you only a grill guy?
When I want that crust all the way across the steak, I definitely use the cast iron. And a lot of times, like with Wagyu, I wouldn't do it, but with the regular ribeye, especially a thick cut one, I would reverse sear it thin and then finish it off with a little butter, garlic, and rosemary in a skillet. Hot cast iron as you can get it, and let that crust develop, basting it with that butter as it cooks, and it puts a beautiful crust on the outside of it.
Now you're talking my love language, Malcolm. You got time to stick around for one more segment?
Sure.
All right, we're talking to Malcom Reed, how to barbecue right. The man knows everything about how to make some tasty meat out on your smoker or your grill. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibbert, Russell Tino guest host, and we'll be back and talk a little bit more about food in this lunch. Anymore, the noon hour, you're eating lunch. We're talking about food. All is good. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibbert, Russell Tino guest hosting today from the Element Well studio, and we're talking to Malcom Reed. Malcom, I got to tell you, I'm salivating a little bit because the picture in front of me on the television is you holding what appears to be, I don't know, a 50-ounce tomahawk, maybe more. It's a big old boy you got going on there. Is that your steak of choice? You go to the tomahawk ribeye?
Well, the tomahawk on that bone, that's a lot of show. You can't eat that bone, but it sure looks cool when you can serve that to a bunch of people. I mean, they're fine steaks, but when it comes down to it, it's just a ribeye steak. So ribeye is probably my go-to steak, but it's like anything. Sometimes you feel like a filet.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people who are steak people will tell you that the ribeye, or maybe a strip on occasion, some people prefer it, but that filet is a dainty little delicate piece of meat that maybe isn't as meaty in taste as something that's got all that good fat running through it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why the ribeye, the fat's where it's at.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, you invest in something like that piece of meat that you got there in the picture. That's an expensive steak. How do you make sure you don't mess that bad boy up?
Well, that's another one where your meat thermometer comes in handy. When you're cooking a big thick steak, it's easy to put a probe right into the center of it. And I usually cook them with it the whole time. The big ones, you really can't grill them. You can't just go hot and fast on those. You've got to reverse sear them, cook them off to the side, bring them up to temp slow, and then finish them over that high heat or in that cast iron to really get that crust on the outside. But watching the internal temperature, that's the key to it. With a steak like that, you're looking at 125 to about 128, perfect medium rare, and it's big enough to where it's going to take it a little time to get there. You can't do it. You can't do that in 5 to 6 minutes over charcoal.
And a steak like that, I'm assuming that when you're done, you want to rest that bad boy pretty good too.
Oh, absolutely. I'm all about the rest when it comes to cooking any meat. I think it lets it stop. All the heat that's pushed the juices from the steak to the outside edges stops, and it soaks it back in slowly. It kind of acts like a sponge. So when you cut it after you slice it, the juice isn't on your board; it's still in the meat, and that's what the rest is doing for you.
Well, one of the texters on the C Spire text line, which anybody can join at 601-879-4395, wanted me to point out that in addition to being excellent at cooking and helping other people to get better at cooking, that you guys sell some incredible rubs, and I have several in my spice cabinet. That's a big part of what you're doing now, right? Is helping people flavor things up.
Oh yeah, we have our own line of rubs and seasonings and sauces, and we sell them at a store in Hernando. We've got a shop and also online on our website. So, you never see me pushing my. I don't say you have to use my stuff because there's a ton of great seasonings out there, but I feel like they're really good products. I use them every day.
Yeah, I mean, I use just your basic barbecue seasoning on ribs all the time. It's good stuff. I mix it sometimes. I think I mentioned this to you last time you were on. I'll mix it with your buddy seasoning. Heath Riles also sells some good stuff. And I like his garlic jalapeno, and I like your barbecue rub, and together they make for a nice little bite of rib, a little contrast in flavor.
You can't go wrong with that combo.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff, man. Well, I think part of it, too, you were talking about reverse sear earlier. And it might make sense to back up and let folks know. I'm sure plenty of folks have heard of that before, but let them know exactly what it is.
Well, so what it is, the reverse sear is where you're starting the meat out at a lower temperature, so it's not getting hammered with the heat. It's slowly letting it come up. It's slowly cooking those juices out of it, and you're stopping it short of done so you can hit it with high heat at the end, and that's the reverse part. Normally, you would just put it on at a high heat and cook it. So this way, we're kind of reverse cooking it. We're cooking it slow, and then we're applying the high heat at the end to get our crust, to get that Maillard reaction, all that flavor, and that's from the char, and that's what makes it so good. And it's really an easy way to get a little more flavor into your meat, too, by cooking it slow and then high at the end.
Well, I will tell you that for a long time I really struggled with cooking a thick steak, and it was because I was stubborn and assumed that, hey, if I'm good at this, I should be able to do it without that sort of low and slow beginning. And once I discovered a reverse sear, sticking a steak in the oven even for 5 or 6 minutes before I put high heat on it, one, the consistency of the product is tremendous. The ability to control the temperature is tremendous, and you get an even temperatured steak throughout doing it that way. So, highly recommend that to folks as they're listening. You mentioned the Maillard reaction. That's really what turns the meat that nice brown color, right?
That's it. That's that chemical reaction that occurs. It gives you that crust, and it makes really good flavor on the outside with your seasonings.
And part of that, I guess, is there are probably some people listening who have made steak, and it ends up being a gray color, and that's because you're missing out on that Maillard reaction where high heat gives you that fun caramel color.
That's right. And a lot of times it comes from turning the steak too often. You've got to let it sit over that heat long enough to get that reaction, to get that char, but not long enough to really burn it. So, once you kind of master doing that, or you get used to cooking it and watching it and getting your times down to when you turn it, it develops a much better flavor, and you're going to get that crust. And that's what you want. That's what those great steakhouses are great at. And it's easily done at home. It just takes a little practice.
Well, I got a question for you. Best way to grill or smoke a deer backstrap?
Well, the best way, I honestly like to wrap them in bacon. I'll wrap them in bacon. I'll start them out about 250 on the smoker, and I'm cooking it till the bacon's done, but I'm watching my internal temperature because deer is a finicky thing. Once you cook it over, that's where it gets that minerally taste that people say they don't like from wild game. But if you'll cook it to where it's medium rare and then let it carry over a little and finish on its own with the heat you built up in it, it'll be just as juicy as, say, a beef tenderloin. So that's the whole thing with it. Now, I have taken them and without wrapping them in bacon, just kind of reverse sear them the same way. I'll bring it up to about 115 to 118 internal, and then put it over hot coals and just kind of roll it about a minute and a half on each side. Kind of think of it as having like kind of 4 sides or 4 edges, just to get that browning, that Maillard reaction to happen on the outside. And it's fantastic that way too. But wrapping it in bacon adds that extra fat. It gives it some more flavor, and the bacon kind of protects it some so you don't dry it out.
Well, let me ask you this. As we head into the new year, a lot of folks are going to be thinking about New Year's resolutions and maybe eating a little bit healthier. Are there things that you think about in that context where putting it on the smoker is a good route to go if you're trying to think about, changing your diet?
Well, I definitely think meat should be part of a good diet. So I'm pro meat, but definitely cooking it, especially on your leaner cuts of meat where if you're worried about, the fat content or whatever, you want to keep that down. You want to cook some venison or deer meat. You want to cook, some different red meat or chicken or anything like that. I think the smoker, the grill is a great option to really give you some, a good way to eat that protein.
Do you smoke much fish?
Man, fish is kind of my nemesis. I love it. I'm getting better at cooking salmon. I'm trying to introduce that to my family a couple times a week. But I will say this, I've cooked the best salmon, and people are probably not going to believe me, but in my air fryer. I don't know what it is, but when I try to cook it on the grill, I mess salmon up. But I've smoked some and had some pretty good results. But we've been eating it about once a week at my house, and I'm doing it in the air fryer. Really simple. It's like 14 minutes, and it for some reason it puts a really great crust on the outside of that fish. And so that's one of my New Year's resolutions, to get better at cooking fish.
Well, it's one of those things that's finicky that, I think most people think of as a sear on the stove as kind of the way to do it. I thought for a second you might mention cooking salmon in your dishwasher, and I'm glad you didn't go there. It sounded like you were about to do a big reveal. It's like I wrap it in banana leaves and put it in the dishwasher.
No, I'm cheating and using that old air fryer, man.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'll tell you one thing, and if you've got a forgiving fish like some tuna or some swordfish or something, smoking that is pretty tasty, and you can make all sorts of fun dips and whatnot with it.
Oh yeah, I do love the tuna. I do love that smoked tuna dip. That's one that we do. And being from Mississippi, I got to smoke some catfish to make that catfish pate dip.
There you go.
So I'm all about it.
Well,
but when it comes to cooking fish, I'm a fried catfish man.
There you go. Well, if folks want to find you online, is it howtobarbecueright.com?
That is absolutely it on all the platforms. The website, on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok and YouTube, of course. So, if you want to check out some recipes or what I'm up to, you can find me on How to Barbecue Right on all those.
Perfect. Y'all follow Malcom. He does some great stuff. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert, Russ Latino guest hosting from the Element Well studio. We'll be